I'm Christian, for any of y'all that don't know me. I do Young Life at LSU, which is like its own little ministry. And there, the way that we teach lessons, I teach it to like college-age kids. So y'all are going to get a taste of what that looks like. So I'm going to start off with I'm a big Disney Pixar fan. I love anything like that that gives you the warm fuzzies and things like that. So I'm starting it off with, I don't know if any of y'all have seen the movie Lilo and Stitch. It's a great movie. So I'm going to give you all a little synopsis of it first, and then we're going to go into the teaching part later. So Lilo and Stitch, basically how it starts off is there's this alien. His name is Stitch, or Experiment 626. And he's on the alien planet. He is created for destruction, and the point of it, as the scientist who created him says, is he's supposed to destroy and basically just be wild. Like that's the point of him being created. And one thing leads to another while he's on that planet, and he escapes and makes it to Earth. And when he makes it to Earth, he's doing his thing. He's tearing up everything that comes in his way. He's doing whatever he can. He's basically like sociopathic and just doesn't care about what anybody else thinks. He does what he's meant to do, which is to be dangerous and basically destroy anything that's in his way. And he ends up getting hit by a truck because he's like the size of a dog. And then when he gets hit by the truck, he gets put in a pound, like a dog pound. And he ends up getting picked up by Lilo. So Lilo is this, like, I'm gonna say like 6-year-old girl or so. And she, throughout the course of the movie, through all of the dumb stuff that he does, all of the destruction that he causes, and it's not just physical destruction, it's mental destruction too. Throughout, in the family, and he destroys their house, he destroys everything. Throughout all of that, she somehow maintains this just childlike love for him. And she's continually just, whatever happens, what can I do to help this, this thing, whatever's wrong with him. And over time, no matter what, there's people who not talk to him, but try to confine him by force and confine his danger and the things that he causes by force. And anytime that ever comes about, he just runs away or gets even worse. But the one thing that seems to really, do anything is a family. And there's a quote in the movie that I'm sure some of y'all know. Family and love are the only force that, for whatever reason, is able to bring him home and create something. And what I think is so cool about that is that, when you see it at first, you're like, oh, this is a sweet kids movie. He gets loved on a little bit, and then everything's fine. But it's kind of fun to look a little bit deeper into things like that, and then relate it. It works really well in terms of college ministry when you're giving lessons and stuff like that. But so why? I have two questions. One isn't to answer; it's just kind of like to think about. Why is it that only a blind, childlike love ever seems to be able to have this kind of profound impact on people? So yeah, it's a good question that a lot of times we don't think about. We see things like that happening, and that's, real profound impacts that kind of change the heart of an individual they're from blind, like why is this person loving me this way? It doesn't make any sense. And so why does that relate to what I want to talk about today? I want to read a pretty cliche Bible story. All of us, or I would assume all of us know this one. It's the Prodigal Son. So I'm going to read that really quick, and then kind of delve into what.
Before you read that, what is the quote?
The quote?
The Lilo and Stitch quote?
That's going to be unveiled at the end.
Okay.
So, his lesson.
Okay.
Good checking his homework.
Things never change.
Good.
All right. So, yeah, I'm going to read the parable of the prodigal son. So Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But," and this is before he even finished what he was planning to say to his dad, "But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the other son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the, this is the older son. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother came home,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never give me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when his son of yours has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" So, before I start any talk on that, I want to ask y'all a question, if anybody might know. Do any of y'all know what the definition of prodigal is? Did anybody want to give a shot at it? And if you don't, it's totally cool. Well, okay. So, this book is called The Prodigal God. And when I first saw that title, it kind of surprised me. Because prodigal, to me, just because of the son, like what he did, it seems like, okay, prodigal probably means like, you know, something bad, at least, because this kid ran away with all of his dad's, with everything his dad had, and just, you know, yes. So prodigal, the definition of it is recklessly extravagant, or having spent everything. And that kind of blew my mind when I first read that. So I'm going to spend maybe like a minute or two on the little brother, but the older brother is my main focus today. So, you know, all of us know the cliche scenario, maybe not cliche, but the scenario of the younger brother, which is, I mean, y'all heard, before he could even get his sentence all the way out, after having done everything he did, his father hugged him and gave him everything. Everything. I mean, it didn't matter at all, period. And it's cool because that doesn't make sense to any of us, at least initially. I know that if I did anything like that to any of my friends, especially, you know, in the world that we live in, typically you're not going to be super welcome back, but God doesn't have that perspective on it. And that's really cool about it. But like I said, the older brother is the main, to me, the main focus of this story when Jesus was telling it. So before I go into the older brother, I got one more question for y'all. Do y'all know who Jesus told that parable to? Like, who was receiving the parable?
The Pharisees?
Yes. The Pharisees were, you know, they weren't ones who were taking all of God's gifts and you know, running away and squandering them. They were, you know, supposedly following all of his orders. but, you know, why would he tell it to them? So I think that the elder brother is the biggest point of this story, which is something that a lot of people miss in what this book really kind of like brought out to me, because I find myself in that position a lot, which is doing everything right. Why am I not getting this? Why am I not getting what I want or what I deserve? And it happens in a number of scenarios. But yeah, so he told it to the Pharisees because they were doing everything right, and you know, look at how they're treating Jesus right then and there. Look at the scenario, what's going on. I think it was directed at the Pharisees for that very reason, and he told the elder brother part. And it's a real quick, short part. You know, a lot of people read it and they really only focus on the younger brother, that you're allowed to just, not that you're allowed, but that, you know, if you go back, God is going to love you and take care of you. But there's something more there. So I want to read. This book is really, really cool, and I just like underlined and highlighted a couple parts from this book. So in the book, they say they have younger brother lostness and elder brother lostness. Younger brother lostness is they're both equally as dangerous per se, but one of them is a little bit harder to catch, which I'm sure y'all can figure out is elder brother lostness. So I'm gonna read a couple parts in this. We see that the elder brother became angry. All of his words are dripping with resentment. The first sign you have an elder brother spirit is when your life doesn't go as you want. You aren't just sorrowful, but deeply angry and bitter. Elder brothers believe that if they live a good life, they should get a good life. That God owes them a smooth road if they try very hard to live up to standards. And I don't know if any of y'all relate, but I've had plenty of moments where you know, okay, I'm doing everything right, so why is this not going my way? Like, it's not fair. And if anything, when you have that mindset, ultimately you're not going to be happy with the outcome typically, unless you get exactly what you want. And we all know that a lot of times it doesn't work that way. And then there's a really cool story that they tell in here about Jesus and his disciples. So one day Jesus said to his disciples, I'd like you to carry a stone for me. He didn't give any explanation. So the disciples looked around for a stone to carry, and Peter, being the practical sort, sought out the smallest stone he could possibly find. After all, Jesus didn't give any regulations for weight and size, so he put it in his pocket. Then Jesus said, "Follow me." He led them on a journey. About noontime, Jesus had everyone sit down. He waved his hands, and all the stones turned to bread. He said, "Now it's time for lunch." In a few seconds, Peter's lunch was over. When lunch was done, Jesus told them to stand up. He said again, "I'd like you to carry a stone for me." This time Peter said, "Aha, now I get it." So he looked around and saw a small boulder. He hoisted it on his back, and it was painful. It made him stagger. But he said, "I can't wait for supper." Jesus then said, "Follow me." He led them on a journey, with Peter barely being able to keep up. Around supper time, Jesus led them to the side of the river. He said, "Now everyone throw your stone into the water." They did. Then he said, "Follow me," and began to walk. Peter and the others looked at him dumbfounded. Jesus sighed and said, "Don't you remember what I asked you to do? Who were you carrying the stone for?" That's pretty cool. It's really simple, and it's a really cool. When I read that, I thought it was cool. So, like Peter, elder brothers expect their goodness to pay off, and if it doesn't, there is confusion and rage. So, you know, those are two big qualities: are confusion, or not two, a few big qualities: confusion, rage, resentment. They all come from that sense, which is, if you look at the Pharisees, that it basically embodies how they acted toward everybody. And then we also see that the elder brother has a strong sense of his own superiority. He points out how much better, this is in respect to the story, the elder brother talking to the father. He points out how much better his own moral record is than the lover of prostitutes. In disdainful language, "This son of yours." He won't even claim his brother at this point in time. He won't even claim him. He's so much better than him. So, you know, that's the danger of it, is that you do everything right. So, you know, we assume that we're going to get everything that we want exactly the way that we want it. And a lot of times that's not the way that it works. And I highlighted, this inevitably leads to feeling superior to those who don't have those same qualities. Sorry, I'm almost done. I had a good bit of things highlighted because I really like this book. People who are no longer sure that God loves and accepts them in Jesus, apart from their present spiritual achievements, are subconsciously radically insecure persons. Their insecurity shows itself in pride, a fierce defensive assertion of their own righteousness, and defensive criticism of others. They come naturally to hate other cultural styles and other races in order to bolster their own security and discharge their suppressed anger. Now, this book, it exaggerates a little bit. You know, this is like worst case scenario, but like at least in my life, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but if you relate, I have plenty of moments where I have feelings like this towards someone or something else that isn't going my way, or you know, I have intense levels of pride is a big one for me, and you know, it may not embody you as a whole, but these can touch little aspects of their life, whatever it is for you as an individual. So then the next thing I have highlighted is, because he does not see himself as being a part of a common community of sinners, he is trapped by his own bitterness. It is impossible to forgive someone if you feel superior to him or her. It does not, this is what this parable says to me more than anything, is it does not matter how well you're doing everything. It doesn't matter how you know, how nice you are to the next person, how many good deeds you do in a day. You are loved equally as much as the next person, no matter what their actions are. Now, does your life unfold the same if you're seeking that relationship and wanting that relationship with God to really be a part of your life? It might unfold a little bit differently, but that doesn't give any of us a right to say, you know, this person is any worse. And you know, I have a hard time ever admitting that I have feelings like that towards anybody. And it's even on the smallest scale. You know, we all have people that it's just like, you know, why do you do that? Like, why are you acting that way? What's wrong with you? But the truth of the matter is that they're loved too. Period. Like, that's the end of that story. And even though we may not be able to, you know, we're human, we're not Jesus, and even though we may not be able to treat them perfectly with love all the time, the fact of the matter is that they are loved the same as us, whether they're the younger brother or the older brother or anywhere in between. And then that's, oh, here's a big one that I really liked. This was a really pivotal thing. So it talks about, in this book, it talks about an abusive husband and his wife. Now, you know, we all know that that's terrible. Stuff like that should not happen. But one thing that it does say here that kind of like makes you think is that in stories like that, even though the guy's making terrible decisions very clearly, there are two sides to it. And what it says here is, so a classic example of this in the marriage of an alcoholic. The alcoholic repeatedly lets down his family in dramatic ways. As a result of her suffering, the addict's wife often develops an enormous amount of self-pity and self-righteousness. The spouse bails him out and yet holds the record of his sins constantly over his head. This leads to more self-loathing on the part of the alcoholic, which is part of why he drinks. It is a seductive, destructive cycle. It may be that the elder brother, to bolster his own image of himself, needed a chronically wayward sibling to criticize, and the smug older brother only made it harder for the younger to admit his problems and change his life. When the younger son comes out of his denial and the father welcomes him, the elder brother realizes that the pattern is being broken, and his fury is white hot. You know, like I was saying, absolutely not condoning any actions like that, but there's often two sides to things like that. And, you know, someone making terrible decisions, well, that is a pity that things like that are happening. A destructive cycle where they are, you know, to them, they know that other people out there are just saying you're worthless and you're a terrible person for all of these things that you're doing. You're not loved. That's what gets reinforced to them, and which causes cycles like that, cycles of pain and confusion. So, you know, those are the main kind of points that I wanted to get across, is that as an elder brother, you know, you may be doing things right. You on the outside, you are doing things right. But are you doing them for the right reason? Is the point. And, you know, on here I go through descriptions of anger and bitterness, resentment and confusion, superiority and judgment. I feel like those are very key emotions that kind of get released from things like that. And part of the reason that I really liked this message was because for the past couple of weeks I had been, when my mom first asked me to do it, I had no idea what I was going to talk about, just like zero clue. And then I talked to one of my friends about he had just gone to Costa Rica on like on a service trip for like a couple months or something like that. And then I went to church, and both of them were about, you know, why are you giving in your life? What's the reason behind it? So that's kind of like the main thing that I wanted to really drive, is that, you know, why is the older brother who seems to do everything right, why is he equally as lost as the younger brother in this book? It's because he gives 4 things in return. And, you know, we're humans. Naturally, we're gonna give for that reason. And I'm not saying, you know, never expect anything in return whenever you give. I'm not saying that at all. But, you know, if the root of the reason that you're giving, for example, time or love or even money, you know, in church, whenever after you give money or if you donate or whatever it is, if the point of that giving is so that you get something in return, is there really any meaning behind it? So he gives for things in return. He gives so that he is in turn deserving of the fattest calf and the best life. He doesn't give just to love his Father. God delights, from my perspective, God delights when we bless others. And I think that's what you want to shoot for more than anything. When you're, and like I said, it's impossible to do this perfectly. I definitely don't do it perfectly, and nobody does it perfectly. But when you're loving and giving time and giving your life to someone else just because you love them, that's meaningful. That has meaning behind it. So then, the next, I have a Bible verse I want to share real quick. It's 2 Corinthians 9, 6 through 8. So it's titled Generosity Encouraged. Remember this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. I have written down here, be generous, not just with wealth, but with time, with patience, with love, and do it without expectation of something in return. Do it because God loves to see us bless and love on the world around us. I don't know about y'all. You know, I'm sure this applies to plenty of people here, if not everybody here. You know, there is for everybody. At some point in your life, you know, next year you're going to be stressing about something completely different. But at any point in your life, there's something that's doing you wrong. You know, it seems like it, at least. If there's not, then awesome. Like, you know, you're killing it. But there's something that seems to be doing you wrong. And this is kind of fun. One thing that I wrote down about Lilo and Stitch, and this is a cool thing, a way for it to tie in. I'm glad this worked out. I was wondering how I was going to tie this in. So after everything goes down, after the family, you know, after, I don't know how many of y'all seen the movie, but a bunch of destruction happens before everything gets back together. A bunch of it, you know, like I was saying, mentally and physically, and all of that. And I've written down, not only is he changed, but we noticed that Stitch was brought into a broken home. But through this, the anger, confusion, and frustration that he brought with him ultimately assisted in the reconstruction of the frail infrastructure of Lilo's family. So it is those very things that you find in your life that's like, why is this happening? Whether it be a person, whether it be a scenario, whether it be, you know, whatever it is, X thing, inner, you know, whatever you have for that. Those things are there because you can grow from them. They can become a thing that allows you to grow and learn and allows you to love your neighbor better than the day before. And I think that's a really cool way that God works, is that a lot of times the stuff in your life, it's like, why, what is going on? It's there for a reason. It may not make sense at first. It may not ever make sense, you know, sometimes, but we can grow and learn from it, whether it be a family member or a friend or something that just seems to constantly be rubbing you the wrong way, doing X thing, you know, there's something there that can probably mold your heart and even theirs into something more beautiful than it was before. And I just think that's really cool. And then I have one more little thing I'm going to read from I wrote it down in my notes. I don't know if any of y'all know who Richard Rohr is. My mom sent me this email thread of this guy who, his name's Richard Rohr, and he's incredibly smart. It's like pretty wild, the things that he says. So here, let me pull it up. So these are two excerpts from the emails that he sends. One of them is, "The mystery of the cross has the power to teach us that our suffering is not our own, and my life is not about me. Instead, we are actually living inside of a larger force field of life and death. One moves from me to us inside of this field of deep inner experience. This is the gateway to compassion and thus redemption. When I can see and accept my suffering as a common participation with Jesus and all humanity, I am somehow saved and become whole in him. I fully admit this is often hard to do when we are still in the midst of our suffering and we just want to be delivered from it." So that's the first excerpt. Excuse me, sorry. Jesus says, "There's only one sign I'm going to give you, the sign of the prophet Jonah. Sooner or later, life is going to lead us, as it did Jesus, into the belly of the beast, into a place we cannot fix, control, explain, or understand. That's where transformation most easily happens, because only there are we in the hands of God and not self-managing. Suffering is the only thing strong enough to destabilize our imperial ego." He's awesome. Yeah, he's really cool. And that's just it. I think I wanted to focus on older brothers, because a lot of times we forget stuff like that. We forget that, you know, even though we may be doing things right in X or Y way, stuff still happens. and I don't think it's just happening because, you know, you don't deserve it and you know, it's wrong that this was happening. It's there because you can grow and you can learn from it, whatever it is. And then I have in bold, from me to us. I loved that he said. It's one of the most simple parts of that passage. It's one moves from me to us inside this field of deep inner experience. This journey can only be traveled on one's own accord. So, all of us, we all have our own different journeys. We have our own issues. We have our own people that frustrate us. We have our own situations. It's so different from person to person. So, I would urge, going forward this week, or this however long, when stuff like that comes up, why is this a part of my journey? Why is this, what's going on here, instead of what's wrong with this person? And a lot of times it's kind of funny. I do all that Young Life stuff and everything, but I find myself all the time saying, what is wrong with you? Like why are you doing that? Or why on earth is this situation happening to me? I find myself doing it all the time. And I think that's the reason that I ended up giving this lesson, is because I find myself in this very position frequently. And a lot of my friends who are in the ministry with me also find themselves in that position. And, I was watching a video the other day about loving other people. And it wasn't even like a religious video, but there was one quote in it that I thought was cool, is, I so often need to hear the words I speak, which I think is very true. A lot of times we know something at heart, and we can forget it like that, and a lot of times it's really hard to recover. And I think this is a good one to kind of build a tendency to recover whenever things like that come about. Why is this happening? Why is this person acting this way? And what can I do to actually love this person, to actually make a change for them or this situation? How am I going to attack it? And a lot of time that kind of sparks that remembering for me of hearing those words that I speak, remembering what they actually mean. So I don't know if I'm running a little short here. I'm coming to a close, but not quite there. I have slow to a close by sharing a piece of my story that I hope will speak to you. So my freshman year, and before that, you heard my mom. I was dumb. Not dumb. I don't want to say that, but I did.
Your mother did not say that.
I made a lot of dumb decisions that weren't. I look back and I'm just like, okay, that was not. Why did you ever do that? But through all of that, the first step for me in kind of figuring this out was figuring out that I am loved. That's something that a lot of us, we forget a lot. A lot of times we get caught up in our work or our school or whatever it is, and if you're messing up here or there, or you made this or that mistake, a lot of times we find ourselves saying, how can anybody love me if I'm making this mistake? Or a lot of times, one way that one of my really good friends in ministry says it is that we all have background junk that only us or maybe the people that are really close to us know. It's, how could somebody love me if they knew this about me? How? The funny part is that you are loved. Like, that's the end of that story. That's the end of it. And the sooner that you realize it is when you can apply it to other people. That's one thing that I talk about all the time with my friends. If you don't know something for yourself, no chance you're applying it to other people. So if you don't know you're loved, you're not going to know how to really, truly love someone else. So for me, step one was realizing that even though I'm an idiot sometimes, I'm loved. Period. That's the end of that story. And then this is a really, really cool one. My area director of Young Life in Baton Rouge, the other day we had this thing called leadership, which is where all the leaders in Baton Rouge come together, and then we do like a Young Life just as the leaders. And it's supposed to be like a redemptive time, or can't think of the word, but y'all know what I'm saying. And in the lesson that he gave us, he gave us these 3 words that really struck home with me, and that's that inefficiency is key. And that's weird. That's a weird phrase. Now, maybe not with like work or your job or school. Inefficiency is definitely not key. But for things like this, for people that are, tiring you out, or an issue, or situations that are confusing and angering, whatever it is, like I've been saying over and over, add in your thing. Inefficiency is key. And what I mean by that is that I can't put it up on a projector or anything, but there's a story, I don't know if y'all know the story of the Samaritan woman at the well. Jesus, whenever he meets her, he says to her, he calls out, he says, you have 5 husbands and you're not even with one of those 5 right now. You're not even staying with one of those 5 right now. He doesn't say it in like this judgmental way. It's just like, look, this is what's going on. And the image that I would want to put up on the projector is, he showed us, when he was explaining inefficiency is key, he showed us this sculpture that someone made of that very moment. And it's of Jesus lower. He is lower, looking up at the Samaritan woman with complete adoration. Even though he just blatantly said, look, you're doing this stuff. Like, I don't think Jesus, whenever he was with people, people that he was saying, be free and move forward, he was inefficient with them. And what I mean by that was, he wasn't trying to get every single person right and trying to contact as many lives as he could right then and there. He was just loving those few people and moments that he had as much as he could, and giving as much as he could to show that they are adored and they are loved. And that's the end of that story. And if you really look at it, that's pretty inefficient. What's cool about the iPad thing y'all are doing, in reality, for all of y'all to find ways to donate and spend all this time to try to get iPads to these kids and all that stuff, that's, in reality, that's inefficient, but it's so beautiful because you're spending all of that time to bless someone else's life. If that makes sense. I'm not saying it's inefficient in like a bad way, I'm saying it's inefficient in a beautiful way. And that's what's really cool about it. And then I knew my mom would want me to, I don't know how many of y'all have had to read this book because my mom gave it to you, but there's a book called Love Does. And there were 2 big quotes in it that I really, really liked. And it says, acting even when you are afraid is something people who are called to follow Jesus have to do all the time. These scenarios that are hard or scary, or people in our lives, they're always hard to confront. Or not always, some people are better at it than others, but they're pretty frequently hard to head-on confront, and that's something that it takes. But also, in the midst of that confrontation, the next quote's is my probably favorite quote of that book, is that love pursues blindly, unflinchingly, and without end. I would say that's for me at least, that's the pursuit towards things like that. And like the Richard Ward thing said, I'm not saying that we have to do it perfect all the time, because we're definitely not going to do it perfect all the time. I 100% do not do it perfect all the time. I probably do it perfect less than half the time, but I try to at least try. And then to answer your question, as a whole, as the people in our lives, the people that surround us and the scenarios in our life that surround us, that whole me to us thing in Richard Rohr, I just like to remember this quote. It's Ohana. Ohana means family, and no family gets left behind. So we have reason to stick with those hard, scary scenarios, and we have reason to grow into love and to transform into something more beautiful than we were the day before, or to assist in that in someone else's life. I think that's Our lesson.
Thank you.